Horror films come in different forms: scary, stylish, mystical, or bloody. But there are those that leave a strong impression, memorable for their atmosphere, plot, or unexpected decisions. Today I will tell you about horror films that are worth watching if you appreciate a tense atmosphere, original ideas, and strong emotions. Last Shift is an atmospheric horror that effectively uses minimalism and builds tension through psychological horror. The film tells the story of a young police officer, Jessica Lauren, who starts her last shift at a closing police station. She thinks it's a routine shift, but soon she encounters eerie phenomena associated with an occult cult that has left a bloody trail behind. Director Anthony de Blasi skillfully plays with shadows, sounds, and a claustrophobic atmosphere, creating a sense of hopelessness. Unlike typical slashers, there is no excess blood here. The film relies on suspense and psychological pressure. Although the plot does not offer any radically new ideas, it keeps you on the edge, and the ending leaves a strong impression. Last Shift is a worthy indie horror for fans of mystical and closed stories, reminiscent of a combination of Carpenter's Blowout and The Ring. The Eyes of My Mother is a creepy art house horror film that combines minimalism, psychological horror, and the visual aesthetics of black and white cinema. The film tells the story of Francisca, a girl whose childhood is overshadowed by a terrible tragedy. Growing up in isolation and raised by a surgeon mother, she begins to see violence and death as something natural, which gradually turns her into a real monster. Director Nicolas Pesce creates an atmosphere of unsettling silence, where the horror creeps up on you without cheap jump scares or excess blood. Instead, the film is frightening with its detachment and painful beauty. Despite the slow pace and unusual style, the film grabs you with its unsettling atmosphere and a strong lead performance by Kiki Magalhaes. The Eyes of My Mother is a dark, cold film that remains in the memory for a long time, but it is not for everyone due to its cruel melancholy. Color Out of Space is a stylish and atmospheric horror film based on the short story of the same name by H.P. Lovecraft. The plot centers on the Gardner family, whose lives are changed after a meteorite falls on their farm. A mysterious alien substance gradually distorts reality, giving rise to terrible mutations and driving the characters to madness. Nicolas Cage, who plays the lead role, gives his signature mix of emotional breakdown and grotesque acting, which perfectly matches the chaotic atmosphere of the film. Director Richard Stanley skillfully conveys Lovecraftian horror of the unknown, complementing it with bright neon colors and an unsettling soundtrack. The film slowly builds tension and then explodes into a psychedelic nightmare filled with body horror. Although the story seems crumpled in places, the visual style and frightening atmosphere make Color Out of Space an excellent choice for fans of Lovecraft and unconventional horror.
Can you believe me now?
I don't know why I believe it.
Dear God.
Saint Maud is an atmospheric psychological horror that delicately balances religious fanaticism and a slow descent into madness. The protagonist, a nurse named Maud, is a recent convert to the faith who cares for a gravely ill woman and is convinced that she must save her soul. However, her devotion to God takes on increasingly dark and painful forms, turning the film into a hypnotic exploration of loneliness, guilt, and religious ecstasy. Director Rose Glass's debut feature impresses with its minimalist yet mesmerizing visual style and an outstanding performance from Morfydd Clark. The story slowly builds up anxiety, and the ending leaves the viewer in a state of shock. Saint Maud is a horror film that scares not with jump scares, but with psychological depth and morbid obsession. The film is perfect for those who appreciate slow, atmospheric horror in the spirit of Hereditary and The Witch.
I'm ready and open.
The Empty Man is an underrated horror thriller that goes beyond the typical urban legend flick. On the surface, it's a story about a detective investigating a girl's disappearance that's linked to a mysterious cult. However, the film gradually unravels into a complex, philosophical tale about the nature of consciousness, faith, and fear. Director David Pryor masterfully builds tension by mixing detective elements with deep Lovecraftian horror. The 20-minute prologue stands out, with an atmosphere reminiscent of A24's best horror films. Despite its vague marketing and complex structure, The Empty Man has become a cult favorite among fans of intelligent horror. It's comparable to Event Horizon or Sinister, but with a more philosophical undertone. The film requires careful viewing and doesn't provide easy answers, but that's what makes it special in its genre. The Cabin in the Woods is a brilliant deconstruction of the horror genre, turning the cliched story of a group of teenagers in a cabin in the woods into something unexpected and witty. At first glance, the plot seems standard. 5 friends go to a secluded cabin where frightening events begin to occur. However, it soon becomes clear that their fate is being watched by a mysterious organization that controls everything that happens. Director Drew Goddard and screenwriter Joss Whedon masterfully play with genre cliches, turning the film into a mixture of horror, black comedy, and meta-commentary on the horror genre itself. The competent balance between humor and tension, dynamic development of events, and unexpected twists make The Cabin in the Woods one of the most original films in its genre. This is a must-see for those who love horror and want to see it from a completely new angle.
What is that thing?
We have to stay together.
28 Days Later is one of the most influential zombie horror films of the early 2000s, which reimagined the genre, making it more dynamic and realistic. The plot centers on Jim, who wakes up in an abandoned hospital 28 days after the outbreak of the Fury virus. The city is empty, but he soon discovers that the streets of London are filled with aggressive, infected people. Unlike classic slow zombies, the infected here are fast, which adds tension and hopelessness to the film. Director Danny Boyle masterfully combines elements of horror, drama, and social satire, showing not only the danger of the virus, but also the dark side of the survivors. The film is shot in a documentary style, which gives it a sense of reality and enhances the immersion effect. 28 Days Later has become a cult classic, inspiring many subsequent films and video games about the zombie apocalypse, making them harsher and darker. It is an impressive adaptation of the cult novel by Stephen King, which successfully combines horror, drama, and elements of teenage adventure. The plot centers on a group of children from the town of Derry who encounter an ancient evil that takes the form of the clown Pennywise, Bill Skarsgård. The film focuses on the fears of each of the characters, turning their personal traumas into material for creepy but stylish scenes. Unlike the 1990 miniseries, this version gives the story a darker and more dynamic tone, and special effects and makeup make Pennywise truly scary. However, the key strength of the film is not only the horror, but also the touching chemistry between the main characters, reminiscent of Stranger Things. Director Andres Muschietti skillfully balances horror and friendly moments, creating an atmosphere of nostalgia for the 80s. It is a rare case when a King adaptation turned out to be truly powerful and spectacular, especially for those who love horror films with a good story. Drag Me to Hell is a bright and dynamic horror film by Sam Raimi, which skillfully combines creepy moments with his signature grotesque comedy. The plot tells the story of a young bank employee, Christine, who refuses to extend a loan to an elderly gypsy, after which she becomes a victim of a terrible curse. Now she has only a few days to save herself, otherwise her soul will be taken to hell. The film is filled with inventive scenes of fear, absurd but frightening visuals, and unexpected plot twists. Raimi uses elements familiar from his cult series Evil Dead, turning Drag Me to Hell into a crazy horror ride with dark humor. This is not just a movie about a curse, it is a stylized, energetic horror with a powerful atmosphere and a memorable ending. An excellent choice for those who love scary stories with elements of black comedy and cult horror. Final Destination is one of the most original teen horror films of its time, offering a unique concept: death as an inexorable, invisible force. The plot begins with Alex, who has a terrifying vision of a catastrophe during a flight. He and several of his friends leave the plane before takeoff, and soon their premonitions are justified. The airliner really does explode. But death has no intention of letting go of those who were supposed to die, and begins methodically eliminating each survivor in the order predetermined by fate. The film is famous for its creative, tense death scenes, in which ordinary household objects turn into instruments of fate. Director James Wong created not just a slasher, but a tense thriller with elements of mysticism, where the main villain is inevitability itself. Final Destination spawned a successful franchise and became a cult favorite among horror fans, proving that it is impossible to avoid death.
Don't let it happen, okay?
Each of these films offers something special, be it psychological tension, unusual presentation, or unexpected plot twists. Whether you like mystical stories, atmospheric horror, or cult horror films, this list has something interesting for everyone. Write in the comments which of these films you liked and which horror films you think are worth watching.